He cleared the temple. And he cursed the fig tree, and he denounced the scribes and the Pharisees. The scribes and the Pharisees are really the intellectual knowledge, the letter of the law. They were religious, but they were in the letter of the law. Jesus said, but it's about the spirit of the law. He had the Last Supper experience, the Passover experience. He had all his disciples gathered, and this is something I want to share with you about that meal. Jesus was having dinner with his disciples one evening. Feel the setup. As they gathered round the table, Jesus looked at his friends. He saw Judas, who of course he knew would betray him within 3 hours' time. He looked at Peter, who, as he well knew, would deny him 3 times before morning, let alone fall asleep with James and John when he needed them the most in the garden. And there was Thomas, who on a crucial occasion would express doubts. Jesus looked around the room, and there seemed only one thing to do. So he called the head waiter over and said, "Separate checks, please." Oh, come on, that was funnier than that. We have to take our spiritual journey very, very, very seriously. And we have to lighten up. And we have to lighten up. And we have to what? Thank you. We have to lighten up because we take ourselves so seriously. It's like, what's important? Well, what I want is important. Well, what I feel is important. Well, it's not. What if that's not what's important? What if what's important is finding God in you, and from that place, being the love, being the peace, being the light that you're here to be, from that place, standing for all of humanity to discover our oneness. When we discover our oneness, lack will disappear, limitation will disappear, war will disappear. That's the message of Jesus. Wake up. Wake up. And so in this week of activation, in this week, we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity every single day, but we have an opportunity in consciousness because there's a focus on it. This week at this ministry, we have a Wednesday evening meditation and sacred ceremony to use as an activation to awaken up to your resurrection. The resurrection is moving from sense to spiritual, from sense consciousness to spiritual consciousness. So Wednesday we have that. On Friday we have communion, another sacred ceremony, and the 7 last words, and sacred music. So we have the opportunity to really use this week to awaken. Whatever it is that you're standing in right here and right now, in your life, in your situation, your circumstance, there is a way through it. There is a way to see it as a blessing. There is a way to know God in the midst of it. That's what we're called to do. That's what we're called to do. And at one point, there will be a moment when enough is enough. I've been studying a little bit a man named Gregory Boyle, who wrote a book called Tattoos on the Heart. And he was he's a Jesuit priest, and I know I've mentioned him before, but he's started homebody industries, so he works with the inner city gangs, the gangs in the Los Angeles area. He's been doing it for 25 years. 25 years ago, the gangs were a huge issue nationwide, and in Los Angeles in particular. It was the worst city for gangs in the entire country, and the neighborhood in which he is was the worst neighborhood in the city of Los Angeles. And he was a young priest, and he got sent to this diocese, and so he started working with the gang members, and he's got tons of stories about it, but this one story I thought was really applicable for today. And he was in and out of the detention centers and on the street, and there were many of those kids, most of them were kids, that were in and out of detention or jail or wherever they were. And there was this one kid named Omar And Omar was 17 years old at this time, and he didn't know Greg, or they called him G. They called him G. He didn't know G very well, but G knew who he was because he was in and out. He'd be in, and you'd see him, and then he'd be out back on the streets, and then he'd be back in, and then he'd be out, and then he'd be back in. And one day when G finished doing his mass at a detention center, this kid Omar called him and said, G, come here. I got to ask you a question. And so he walked over, and Omar's sitting there, and he says, yeah, what do you want? He goes, I got to ask you something. It's really, I just really need to know. Can I ask you? He said, sure, anything at all. And 17-year-old kid says, how many homies have you buried? The ones that died from, the ones that were killed because of gangbanging. And Jesus said, 75. At the time of the writing of the book, it's 167. It's probably doubled by now. And Omar shakes his head, geez, darn, dang. I can't tell you what he really said, but you get it, right? Shakes his head in disbelief. He says, when is it ever going to end? And G reaches down to take Omar's hand, and he pulls him up. And he looks him eye to eye, straight in the eye. And he says, Omar, my son, it will end the minute you decide. And Omar says, well then, I decide. He says, Omar, it has always been as simple as that. When will your suffering end? It will end when we decide. When will the suffering on the planet end? It will end when we decide. When will we wake up to the glory that is God? It will end when we decide. Robert Frost wrote, how many things have to happen to you before something occurs to you? How many things have to happen before something occurs? This Holy Week, this Palm Sunday, this Easter week, let this be the moment of your awakening. Let this be the moment where you come into a new experience of the love that you are, of the light that you are here to be, of the joy that is yours in this moment. Let this be the year. Let this be the week. Let this be the moment that you come into the full realization of who you are on the planet to be, which is an expression of God's essence. Perfect, whole, and complete, just as you are. Open yourself. Right now, open yourself to the love, to the light, and to the joy of Spirit. God bless you. Amen.